Okay. And action. Today we're talking about weeds. Not weed, weeds. Welcome back to episode 21, Tuesday Talks with Red, where today I'm talking about weeds and carnage. So this goes back to back in the days of when all we did was write blogs. So that's probably before, most of your time. But in 2010, I had written a blog on my really cool blog spot about an experience that I had while I was working in my gardens at the house I lived in at the time. So I lived in a house that was built like on the side of a ridge, and in order to keep there from being a lot of erosion, the people that lived there before us had put up this 3-tiered like garden set. It was crazy. It went the whole length of the house, and it was a lot. Now they were an older couple and they really loved gardening, I guess. And so there was a lot of gardens at this house. Like I drive by it now and it's so sad just because they haven't taken care of it and it's grown up and you can barely even see the house because there's just so much going on there, which is it's sad. My kids grew up there for a portion of their childhood. So anyway, when we moved into that house, I had said, well, I'll take care of all things inside and you, hubby, get to take care of all things outside, just because it was a lot. There was a lot. Plus, he really didn't like cleaning that much, and I love to clean. Like it was therapeutic for me. So we had this deal. Well, there's no way one person could handle these gardens on their own. Okay, when they needed to be weeded, when they needed to be cleaned out, mulch needed to be put in, there's just no way. And so he had been working on some other things around the outside of the house, and I had a weekend where I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna get out here and I'm gonna start working in weeding these gardens. So there's 3-tiered garden, and then out in like the middle of the front yard, there was like this big circle garden that had this big, beautiful Japanese maple that I think is dead now. But it was this big, beautiful Japanese maple with some beautiful flowers planted all around. It was just gorgeous. Anyway, but it had come time for weeding season. They were just getting overgrown. Some were shooting up tall, and so it just needed to be done. So I grab my gloves, I head out there after I'd gotten home from work on a Friday, and I started working. I knew I was gonna get it done, at that point in time, but I knew I had to get started. So I started out there where that Japanese maple was. So if you're standing on our porch, remember I told you it was built into the side of a ridge, there's a lot of tiers down, and then you look down into that front yard, and you could see this, round garden with Japanese maple. It's beautiful. So I'm looking out there and I'm like, oh my goodness, there's a lot to be done. So I headed out to weed like I've done many times before. And it's starting to get dark, and I'm, just pulling things the best I can. And God spoke in the middle of this. Like and for those of us that are not believers, I saw a lesson. Okay, so either direction that we're going here, there was a lesson to be learned in this for me. And that it's been now 10, 11 years, and I still apply lots of aspects of this lesson to my daily life now. And so I want to share this with you guys, especially because I think this is a good fit for it, because of the next 3 Tuesday talks that are coming are areas that tried to destroy me. So I think it's very important that I start with this lesson that I learned in the middle of weeding my gardens. So I am working on these weeds. So so sometimes you can see those weeds that have big thick roots or a big thick stalk. You know the one I'm talking about, that a lot of times you can just reach over, you can kind of wiggle a little bit and it comes right up, and it's kind of milky. Like you can see there's a lot of moisture coming out of it. It's kind of milky, and like I had a bunch of those in there. So those were easy. Like I literally could just walk up with my bare hand, just grab a hold of it, kind of shake it around a little bit and pull the whole thing up. The thing that I noticed about those weeds, they're ugly. Like there's nothing pretty about them. You know they're a weed at first sight. They're big, they're thick, and they're so easy to pull up, and their roots, because their roots are about this long. There's like 5 of them, and they just kind of stick out, and they're super simple to just pull out, okay? Versus some of these that have flowers on the end of them, and they're kind of interwoven with each other, and they just kind of crawl and take over the whole ground, that you can just grab a hold of, like, and they kind of break apart. Like if you've ever done it, you know, you reach down, you grab a handful of them and start to pull, and they just, because they're tiny, they have tiny little, almost fine line type connectors to the next whatever group, okay? And I realized the only way that I was going to deal with these little fine ones was to get my gloves on that have the grippers, and I had to get down real close to the soil, and I had to like push, and like I couldn't just pull them, because if I just pulled them, it just ripped off the top, ripped off. Now they're gone, you know, you don't see them anymore, but within a day or two, the roots that are still deep down in that soil just reproduce more. So I gotta go and do it again. So we could be sitting here for days and days and weeks and months and whatever, just constantly getting rid of what's on top, but we're never really dealing with what's down below. And so what I had to do was put these gripper gloves on, get really super close to that soil, and just constantly, just slowly but surely tug in all these different directions until those roots began to give a little bit, tug and pull. And it took a lot longer than those big, ugly, thick sucker shoots to just pull out. I had to like slowly just take my time and rock back and forth and pull, and then get a little, as more roots would come up, get a little bit closer to that soil, grab down by the roots, move and move and move again, pull them up a little bit more until eventually those roots finally gave way enough to come out of the soil. But what I saw was they're connected to the next group, so I got to get down in there and kind of wiggle around. So I began to see a concept that, like I said, I really felt like God began to impress on me. And for those of us that don't believe that route, I saw a lesson coming out of these ugly weeds that I was pulling. A lot of times those big, ugly God parking lot sins in our life, those of us not in the God parking lot, just things that we struggle with, those big, tall, ugly ones that people can see. Like I can look out over this garden where this Japanese maple resides, and I can see that that's a weed. I can see that that's a problem. I can see that if I don't take care of that, it is probably going to it could probably destroy all the beauty that I'm sitting here looking at. And so when we apply that to our lives, I was able to go, you know what? Okay, so these that everybody can see, so my big things that anybody who's remotely in my presence could go, ooh, I see that Billy struggles with that. I see that Billy doesn't do well in XYZ. Okay, so if you knew me, you know that was easily to see in codependency and control, which we're going to talk about in the next lesson, or in the next Tuesday talk. So those are easy. Those are really easy for people to point out. They're easy for us to recognize. They're easy for me to make a decision. Do I want to leave it here and chance that it's going to snuff out all the other beautiful things in my life? Or do I want to get rid of it? And a lot of times if I make the decision, okay, I'm going to work on getting rid of this, it's easy because I have lots of people willing to step inside and help me because they see it. I know and recognize how shallow these roots are, and I can deal with them at the root and just be done, right? Pull it up, be done, throw it aside. Now, that doesn't mean there might not be others of the exact same thing that I've still got to deal with, which we'll talk about that in future episodes. But those big ugly ones, while they're not fun to deal with, they're a lot more easy to deal with because I can just get it, grab it, do the work that's got to be done, pull it out, throw it out. Okay? But now let's talk about the baby ones, the pretty ones, the ones that when people look upon my life go, I don't see anything wrong there. But I know that those roots run deep and they're interconnecting and they're trying to snuff out what's beautiful in my life. So these little prettier, that look pretty on the surface, but we know those roots go way deep down and they're interconnected and they're trying to snuff out everything about us. Those are a lot more difficult. So what I found in my life, in working with women and leaning in with friends, is a lot of times when I begin to realize, okay, I know this looks pretty, but I think I struggle with something like this. I think I need some help or whatever. A lot of times friends will try to step in and do what I talked about I did when I was gardening for those weeds. They just want to be like, okay, here, I'll help you, and grab and pull, and look, it's gone. I'm here to help you, when that's not really what's happened. Those roots are still down there and they're trying to snuff the life out of everything that is good and healthy. And so I really had to take the time to dig in and figure out not just how deep those roots go, but what all they're connected to. Okay, so a lot of times, those low-hanging fruit that we see that we're like, I know this is something that I struggle with, and either I'm just going to be like, all right, screw it, I'm just going to keep struggling with it because it's fun or whatever. A lot of times those roots they're so deep, they're connected to other pieces that if we're not willing to do the work to figure out what those connections are, all we're doing is ripping off those top flowers. That's literally it. Just ripping them off, throwing them aside, and guess what? In a short season, they're going to come back. Okay, so I knew I was done with a lot of these short season business, and it was time to get to the root of a lot of this, find those interconnections and pull them out. I'm going to talk about those in the next 3 episodes. So there was that lesson that was oh my goodness, these big tall things that everybody can see, those are easier, even though they may be big and they may be difficult. My dogs are fighting, so you're welcome. They're a lot easier to deal with because those roots are so shallow. It's those beautiful things that look beautiful on the surface that are just trying to choke the life out of us. And it's time to flip the script on those as well. It's time to stop playing. We got to dig in and do it. So I'll talk about how I dealt with those types of things in the next 3 episodes. But there was a second lesson that thumped me upside the head in the middle of this weed season. So I told you I started on Friday night, right? So I'm weeding, I'm doing all the things on a Friday night. It's getting dark, and I'm like, okay, I've got to stop. So I put all my stuff up, I go inside, I get a shower, blah, blah, blah. I know I'm going to get up the next morning and I'm going to get back to work, right? Because remember, there's still 3 tiers to go. All I did was that Japanese maple. So I get up the next morning, I get ready, I walk out on my porch, and I'm going to look out on all this really good work that I've done, right? I look out on this bed, this garden bed, and it's beautiful. I've done all the work for this Japanese maple, right? But I look out and I see things that I've missed because I tried to do it in the dark. Number 1. I tried to hurry up and get done with what I could instead of being like, you know what? I'm going to wind up missing things. I'm going to wind up leaving things behind. Let me just stop and do it when it's a little bit healthier of a time. Okay? So I saw a lot of things that I missed. A lot of pieces that I just broke off the tops, like I talked about, that I didn't think I did. I thought I had done the work, but I just broke off the tops. And so now I have these little bitty, teeny tiny sprigs sticking up that there's no way I can get a hold of unless I want to get a claw and dig down and really begin to tear up the bottom. That's going to hurt way worse than if I had just done the work originally. All right, are we seeing a connection here? So there was that, but also all around the outside of this beautiful bed, this garden bed of beautiful tulips and roses and all that were around this huge, gorgeous, purple Japanese maple was Carnage. There was the Carnage. And the lesson and the God thing that I got from this was, just because I do the work does not mean there's not fallout. And I think a lot of times that's what has kept me in the past from doing some of this work that needs to be done. Because I'm afraid. I'm afraid people are going to see it, because, you know, those little pretty things that I was talking about, a lot of times those are ones that we don't let other people in to see. Like, they're struggles that only I know, or maybe me and one other person that I've shared with and said, hey, can you take this to the grave? Right? But 9 times out of 10, those are ones that we harbor inside and we don't tell anybody about, because I don't want to be judged. I don't want people to know. I want to keep it in the dark and not, I sure don't want to deal with it, but I sure as heck don't want anybody knowing the truth about it, right? And so when I started to dig in and do the things that needed to be done, it didn't mean there wasn't fallout. It didn't mean there wasn't carnage that still needed to be dealt with. Because I'm sure not going to make this flower bed, this garden beautiful, work out all the crap, and then just leave all the ugly around the outside and be like, okay, look at this. Now, don't look at this, guys. I know this is ugly. I know this is nasty. Like, don't look at this, but just look at this, right? That doesn't make any sense. Like, that carnage, that fallout still has to be dealt with. And so I'll get into how that practically played out for me in 3 of the huge issues that I've really dug in and did that work with in the past handful of years. But it's really funny that I was shown that lesson 11 years ago. And it's played out in lots of different spots in my life. But I really got to dig in and do that interconnected work just in the last 3 years. So I'm looking forward to sharing those pieces with you in the next 3 episodes. So come back next week, where the first one I'm going to tackle is my codependency and control. Yeah, it doesn't mean it's gone, but I'm going to get to dive in and talk about how I really began to recognize it, because 9 times out of 10, those of us that struggle, and here's the funny part, little spoiler for the beginning of next week, is that a lot of times we don't think we struggle with codependency and control. We think we're doing just fine with it. And so, but how I really recognized there really needed to be some work done in it, and how I worked through it, dig in and did the work. But then now, today, I just learned to struggle well with it as opposed to just struggle with it. So we'll talk about codependency and control next week. So come back. I'll see you then, and have a great week.